Hello and welcome back to the Independent Pianist. I'm your host, Cole Anderson, as always. If you followed the channel regularly, you'll have noticed that I took rather an extended hiatus here. I haven't posted a video since the end of November. So it's been a whole month that I've been out, and I think that requires a little bit of explanation about what I've been up to and what's been happening. So December just ended up being a perfect storm of activity for me. The very first weekend in December was the studio recital for Amy Beth Horman's studio at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And you might know I do quite a bit of concertizing with Amy Horman's daughter, Ava Packiam, who's a wonderful violinist and also her student. But I also co-teach a lot of Amy Beth's violin students. So I teach them score study. I kind of teach them how to interpret the music that they play effectively, especially as regards playing with orchestra or piano. And I always go to San Francisco and play for her students when it is studio recital time. So having said that, though, it makes the weekend really, really busy because I generally fly out on Thursday. I get there, rehearse all of Friday, Saturday, then the recital is on Saturday or Sunday. And this time, in addition to all of that, I also had a practice recital that I did with Ava for a concert that we had in New York. So in the middle of the week, the following week, we were in New York for the Salon de Virtuosi. We did the same program which I already uploaded recently, but it was in kind of like a private apartment that was very beautifully set up for concerts, and they had a beautiful Model A Hamburg Steinway there. So here's some pictures. You can see we were there performing. Unfortunately, I don't think the concert was recorded, but it's the same repertoire I already put up. So it's always fun getting to New York, but it also just distracted me again from putting up a video that weekend. I did some sightseeing and I just got kind of distracted with that. If you ever get the chance, I highly recommend checking out the museum on Eldridge. It's a beautiful old synagogue that you can see kind of near Chinatown. Here are some pictures. You can see where I was. I just spent actually quite a bit of time in this museum just because it was so beautiful and so peaceful. And so then immediately after that weekend, I was off to Montreal for a vacation, and I got to visit a lot of nice restaurants in Montreal, go into the Old Quarter. I actually stayed in the Old Quarter in Montreal. And of course, went by the Basilica de Notre Dame, among other places. Took a stop at the planetarium. Just had a great time, but I was so lazy by that time, so kind of tired out from all the work I'd been doing that I just, again, didn't really feel up to making a video. Felt bad about it, but I just didn't get to it. So then immediately after Montreal, I went back home and I was all pumped up to work on some video editing and do a lot of practicing. I've been practicing the Liszt Sonata recently. I'm hoping to record that very soon. And I got super, super sick the first day I was back. I mean, flat on my back, sick. Absolutely no joke. I couldn't even get out of bed the first couple days. Had a terrible cough and all this stuff. So I had to get over that first. So I really didn't do much practicing at all. I barely managed to do a little bit of teaching that week, but I was totally out of it. So once again, I missed my next video because then I was flying to visit family for the holidays, and that's where I've been ever since. Just kind of recovering and recuperating and trying to get my mental state back into a balanced place. I think I was already pretty tired from all the work I'd been doing earlier in December and in November, and then getting sick on top of that just kind of threw me for a loop. So I've been totally in a different universe for a little while. But now I feel like I've really got my vim back, my energy back, and so I'm finally going to put up this video, which I meant to put up several weeks ago. This is a fairly small piece, but a beautiful one, and it's a continuation, really, of an earlier video that I did. I did this video where I compared different settings of this Goethe text, the Kennst du das Land from Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship. It's a very famous text. It's been set many, 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 many times as a lead by various composers: Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann, Wolf, etc., etc., and also by Liszt. And Liszt, if you watched that earlier video, you'll remember that the Liszt version was really my favorite, and it's remained my favorite since then. And I was very excited to find that Liszt had made a piano transcription of this song. And so I learned it and recorded it to put it on this channel. And there's a number of very interesting things that I found in looking at Liszt's very imaginative reworking of this setting. The first really interesting thing about this transcription, which you might notice, is that Liszt sets the opening for the left hand alone. And this is quite a striking thing. I mean, Liszt never wrote a piece for the left hand alone. That became popular later on. Of course, there are a prelude and a nocturne for the left hand alone by Scriabin. There are many pieces by Leopold Godowsky for the left hand alone. Liszt never did that, but it does seem clear that he really realized how much potential there was for the left hand when it came to delivering beautiful melodies. And if you think about it, if you think about the right hand were always struggling with the shape of the hand in comparison to where the notes are located. Because the melody notes, which are on top and which have to be emphasized really strongly, are always being played by our weakest fingers. The little fifth finger is always having to take those high melody notes. And it's totally different for the left hand. For the left hand, you have the thumb. You have the wonderfully strong, powerful, weighty thumb that will take all the high notes in chords. So several composers, including Liszt, obviously, and then, of course, famously later, as I mentioned, Leopold Godowsky, made use of this characteristic in their melodies. So this is a great example of this. It sounds, you could easily play this with two hands, but the effect with the left hand alone, there's a certain lingering effect that it creates by having to do all these arpeggios with the left hand. And it causes the high notes to be a little bit delayed in a very expressive way when you get to those high notes. And then, of course, with the thumb playing those notes, you get just a very natural kind of weightiness and heaviness to the sound, fullness to the sound. So here's what that sounds like. And of course, you'll notice that because it's for the left hand alone, you cannot actually play all of the notes totally connected in the melody. There's always a little bit of a delay sometimes where you're going back down to arpeggiate the chords and then getting up to that top note is slightly delayed. But this should not disturb you, actually, because our ear automatically will fill in that space when you have to do that. It's a very striking thing. And actually, the more resonance in the hall, the larger the space, the more easily our ear does this for us. So you really don't have to be concerned about doing various little tricks to try to connect exactly the sound through those little breaks where you're trying to get the left hand arpeggios, because there's something actually very expressive about this kind of delayed quality to the sound if you are not nervous about it, if you really own that kind of sound effect. You'll actually hear this same kind of effect in the opening of another famous Liszt piece, the Benediction de Dieu dans les Solitudes. I have a video of that which you can check out if you'd like. It should be popping up right about now. And that's quite striking, and it's written in such a way that the left-hand thumb takes the majority of the melody notes in that opening as well. And I remember actually when I played that piece, I did some things where I kind of readjusted the left hand into the right hand occasionally in order to connect the melody a little bit more. And now I kind of feel like that wouldn't be necessary anymore. I would probably just play it with the left hand by itself, because there is, again, just a certain quality, an expressive quality to the tone when you're forced to only play with the left hand. And those kind of minute little delays and gaps are actually filled in by our ears anyway. So you'll see many pianists now, when they play the Benediction, they do many fancy things to try to connect the melody line a bit more by taking certain notes with the right hand, and I think actually that's a little bit too fussy, and it's really not necessary. There's a certain type of stylishness to playing the melody completely with the left hand, and a beauty to the tone that you can get, a simplicity and beauty. So there's the opening, and of course Liszt continues expanding things and doing beautiful arpeggio harp-like effects as the music continues on. And I already mentioned in my other video how certain of the interjections seem to suggest some kind of plucked stringed instrument, maybe the zither, which is the instrument that Mignon is accompanying herself with in the actual novel. So you can hear that in a passage like this. And of course, because there is no actual text that the listener is hearing, Liszt dramatizes the repeat of the first stanza. So in his original setting, the first two stanzas are set with the exact same music, pretty much. He only changes a little bit the harmonic direction here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. But in this transcription, he actually expands it with certain tremolo figures and other things to dramatize and kind of bring out the feelings of the text, even though the text is not actually there for us orally. So I think I mentioned already earlier in the video, or maybe I didn't, I forget now, but there are actually 3 versions of this song, and this transcription is a transcription of the first version, the earliest version of this song. And Liszt revised it a little while after he made the first version. He made some subtle changes. The first 2 versions are pretty much the same, but he did make some very subtle changes. He pared back the piano part in several sections, and he also made some very slight kind of harmonic changes and some changes in the melody here and there, just little alterations that made the melody more subtle and actually more touching and more understated in a very beautiful way. So one place is right here at the end, and this is quite a striking passage because this is an extension that Liszt has made where he recaps some of the text, which is not in the original poem. He has the singer recap the first line of the previous 2 stanzas as well as the 3rd stanza. And it's a very, very effective move here. So the changes I make are right at the end of this line and the beginning of the next one. You'll see in the original that Liszt actually introduces this D natural a little earlier. And in the second version, he delays that. So the difference in sound is, again, it's quite subtle, but I think because the kind of diminished harmony is delayed a little bit longer, it's actually quite effective. So here's what the original version sounds like at this point. And then here's the way that I altered it to bring it in line with the second version. So you can hear it's a very subtle difference, but it's quite striking. And Liszt constantly was making these kinds of very subtle revisions in his pieces between the first and second versions. By the way, the third version of this piece is more in the late style. He adds some kind of cryptic little interludes in the piano part, and he really thins down the piano part a lot. He already thinned it down a bit in the second version, but the third version it becomes much more spare and sparse, in keeping with Liszt's late style. So yeah, after having made this recording, I actually think that there are several other places where I would probably go back and change things slightly to make them a little closer to the second version, just because I really like some of the variety of tone that Liszt introduces in the second version. For example, he has this beautiful change in the piano part right here, this kind of octave displacement, which is not in the original and it's not in the transcription either, but I think it's actually really beautiful, and I would probably want to put that back in. Another striking place where Liszt made extensive melodic shift in his second version was right here, measure 90 in the transcription. So you'll see in the first version, the singer has this much more elaborate and dramatic sextuplet, leaping up into the high register and coming back down. And it's much more subtle in the revised version, as you can see. But I think that the revised version flows much better, and I think I probably would prefer that now. The most dramatic shift, which I only slightly changed, is at the end. So in the original version, there's this quite dramatic cadenza, which I thought was pretty effective on the piano, so I kept it. And this is at the point where Liszt again slightly breaks from the original text. He repeats again this time it's the ending text where Mignon is referring to Wilhelm Meister as her father, her protector, her beloved. She puts all these things together, and Liszt actually recaps them at the end, all three of them together, which is a very, very effective again and quite moving. In the second version, it's a little more cryptic and a little more understated. There's no big cadenza. He just has this little snippet of melody which kind of fades away. And the harmonies are also a lot less dramatic. There's no shift in the bass. In the original, there's this kind of dramatic drop from G sharp to C sharp in the bass, you can see here. But in the second version, Liszt did away with that, and I think it's quite moving. If I could find a good way to set that on the piano, I might try to shift to that as well. Also in the ending, Liszt does something else kind of interesting. In the original version, he has these very widely spaced chords, which are a bit more in keeping with the interludes previous that the piano had, which also had these kind of very wide spaced arpeggiated chords, and Liszt marks them to be played arpeggiando. In the second version, though, Liszt actually telescopes these chords down. He makes them smaller and less widely spaced, so they have a little bit of a purer, simpler sound to them. So there it's a little more ambiguous. I guess you just take what you feel is right, but I'd be tempted to use the later version just because it is, again, a little purer and a little simpler. But in this recording, I stuck to the original version. Yeah, so thank you to one of my viewers, actually, Neil Kalin. He pointed out that there was actually a first version which I was missing. I missed it when I was researching it originally because the first version on the internet is only in manuscript form, so I thought that was just a manuscript that hadn't been published, but I think it was actually published. It's just you can't find it on IMSLP. But that's basically it. I think I've gone over everything that I really changed in this transcription and all the really interesting facets of Liszt's version. So just enjoy the transcription. It's a beautiful, beautiful transcription, quite tricky to play, but well worth it. And I'll be back next week, I promise, with some more great material. I have a lot of things that I want to share with you guys in the near future. So I'll be back home next week, and I'll be getting back to my practicing, and we'll have more stuff coming up. So thanks very much. Happy New Year to everyone out there. I hope this new year will be a really good one for all my viewers, for everyone. And please keep practicing, keep in there, and I'll see you next week.